have salmon or tilapia?
Salmon.
Is this a big enough piece for you?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's class. We're going to start here in just a second. Let me get my bearings straight. And I'll be with you in just a second. Kathy, 10 a.m. Wednesday. Okay. I'm all yours, at least for the next hour. So let me bring everybody online here. So hang on just 1 second, please. We got a really cool subject tonight. Not your typical marketing class, okay? We're actually going to talk about subject to purchases tonight and other closely related investing techniques for buying properties. So it's been popping up. Somebody must have been out there on the airwaves, one of the late night gurus teaching it, because I've been getting more questions on it. So I thought, why don't we just go ahead and talk about it and lay on the cards on the table and see what you guys think as far as an investing strategy. So this would be unique, sort of a different kind of different than our normal weekly classes. So I'm trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. So give me just a second, please. I'm sorry. I'm trying to talk and promote you all as a panelist. So in any case, welcome aboard, everyone. Let me do my quick chat here. Happy Monday. Oops, let me spell Monday correctly. There. How about that? The first day, no, actually the second day of the second week of the second month of a new year. How about that? Second day of the second week of the second month. So I hope January was really spectacular for you guys. I think it's probably one of the busiest Januaries, one of the busiest months I think I've had in a long time. Been absolutely spectacular. So any case, tonight, so I don't know if Alyssa's going to make it, but she was up in Georgia today in a property.
I'm on.
Oh, hey, Alyssa, how are you?
We're still driving back.
Okay.
So I'm in a dark car. I'm not driving.
Okay.
So I don't have my video on.
That's okay.
But I can talk.
Okay. Sounds like a beginning of a good Alfred Hitchcock movie. I'm in a dark car driving down the road. So in any case, what I'll do, Alyssa, is I'm going to go over some of the stuff I sent you previously and posted to Workplace, like a real high level description. By the way, the description I shared of a subject to purchase is not mine personally. It's from an attorney in Virginia. Okay. And you can, what they say, the old saying is you can always trust an attorney for Virginia, right, Tom? So in any case, I don't know the guy. I don't know him personally, but two of my best friends do, and they've worked with him in the past. Rick Benez and Anna Jenkins, who still own properties in Fredericksburg, recently relocated to Florida because they've did the follow the motto and live the dream, and they're travel the world. So how about that? Any case, so let me bring up the documents here, and let's see. We'll start with this one. Let me do my screen share. Hang on just 1 second. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Please forgive me. I came out of nowhere. Now, I should ask this first. If you do have questions initially, go ahead and post them, or if you have any questions in general, any subject related to what we teach, before I dig into this subject, let's go ahead and address those first or early on. If we could, that would be wonderful. And I wanted to have Alyssa on. Oh, thanks, Teresa. Because she was up looking at a property today, and they're on the way to Orlando now. And so I thought it'd be good to have her on to talk about her experience so far. And you guys could also ask questions of Alyssa. So thanks, Alyssa, for doing this. I know you're traveling and quite busy. Let me double check the question box. Okay, we're clear. So first things first, you've all heard of assumable mortgages. Now, back until I'd say the late 80s, early 90s, almost our mortgages were assumable. And then throughout the 90s and early 2000s, fewer and fewer of them were assumable. But one type of mortgage is still assumable, is a VA mortgage, okay? And also a lot of adjustable rate mortgages are also assumable. Now, what's interesting is that's according to the banker's documentation. They'll say in there, this loan is unassumable. However, there are situations where banks would actually, override that and entertain the thought of an assumption. Assumption being, let's say I'm buying the house from Tom Silvestri, and maybe in my past I had a bankruptcy, foreclosure, or something like that. But in the last, 3 to 5 years, I've been doing pretty good. That kind of thing. I've got, my credit's on the way up. I'm gainfully employed. I've been saving money, but traditional banks still won't give me a loan because I'm still in the penalty box, so to speak. And Tom says, you know what, Gary, I think you're a pretty good guy. I'll sell the house to you, and I will let you assume my mortgage. See, back in the old days, a lot of times you could assume a mortgage with literally nothing but a one-page paper you fill out, and they don't even check you out. They just assume, let you assume the mortgage, right? Nowadays, what you can do is what's called a subject to. Now, there's all kinds of debate about this. I'll tell you up front, I personally, I'm not a big fan of these things. Let me rephrase that. All of these creative purchasing techniques have their place. They're just not every place, okay? I would prefer traditional mortgages where you get a complete clean title, full rights of ownership, and putting some money down. So you start off with equity, you get a lower rate on your mortgage and so forth. But not everybody's in that situation on every day. Maybe you come across a property and you're already tapped out. You've got 10 outstanding loans. You've reached your loans to one ratio, whatever bank you're working with, or for whatever reason, a traditional mortgage is not in your cards right now. And that happens. It's happened to me too. I've had situations where I borrowed so much, I've reached the loans to one ratio for a particular bank, okay? So one possibility is doing what's called a subject to purchase, where you purchase a property subject to the existing mortgage, excuse me. And what you do is, it's not like a wraparound mortgage where the current owner still makes the payments and then you make payments to the owner. So you make payments to the owner and they still make payments on the mortgage. And that's typically what a wraparound mortgage is. In your mortgage, the payments are bigger than their payments, so they keep the difference. A subject to mortgage is you actually give them a chunk of money up front, okay? And then you take over the payments on their existing mortgage, even if it's not assumable, okay? So, because you're not actually going through an assumption, you're not filling out paperwork, you're not telling the bank that you're taking over the property and taking over the mortgage, okay? And by the way, I should note here, on a traditional assumption where you do notify the bank, you fill out the paperwork, and you assume responsibility for the mortgage, you also typically get the title, okay? The title transfers. On a subject to, just like a wraparound mortgage, the title does not transfer. Their current owner retains the title of the property for a period of time, okay? So in other words, you might give the owner $25,000, take over the payments on their mortgage, okay? And then sometime in the future, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, then you get your own mortgage, pay off the existing one, and then you're home free, okay? It's just a temporary measure to take control of a property. So it's good to do this when credit's tight, demand is down. So what's interesting is I'm seeing people doing this. It's popping up all over the place, and you can see right here in the very first paragraph, it says right there, this is a good thing to do, or a valid strategy when demand is down. Well, right now demand's up, obviously, right? Not down, demand is up, and yet people still do it. So sometimes in a down market, lenders go out of business, right? Or again, they tighten restrictions. In the last recession, it was very difficult to get a mortgage, especially if you didn't have a track record, okay? So what it does is it allows you to take control of a property without going through traditional financing. Okay, now, so some problems you can overcome with this strategy or when the seller is upside down on the mortgage, right? They owe more than the house is worth. And you can use what we call contract for deed, and that's essentially what we're doing here. Contract for deed and a land trust essentially mean the same thing. High inventory means sellers must do something to make their house stand out from the crowd, right? High inventory means, right, low demand, okay? And you can use a contract to deed for that, okay? In any case, few lenders who remain in the business have tightened qualifications. Answers: don't get a new loan, recycle the own load with, again, contract for deed. What if the owner doesn't want to do a short sale? Whoops, sorry, jumped way ahead way too fast here. Excuse me. Or foreclosure to destroy his or her credit, you can take over the payments and bring them back to basically made whole. The challenge is if they're in pre-foreclosure, there may have already been some additional costs that have accumulated on the part of the bank. They've issued notices of default. They may have got an attorney involved, doing title search, make sure there's no other liens on the property, doing preliminary work, getting prepared for a foreclosure, where they're not going to just absorb those costs. They want to pass those on to the owner of the property, right? The borrower, the mortgagee, okay? So in any case, let's talk about what actually is a contract for deed. Contract for deed, secured method of private financing whereby the buyer takes over the seller's payments, okay? Different than a land contract, wrap mortgage, that type of thing, all right? Seller retains title, which is the same thing as a land contract, to the property until the buyer pays off the loan. Usually a refinance or sale of the property sometime in the future. Buyer gets possession and the benefits of ownership, including all future appreciation, income tax deductions, and so forth, go to the buyer. Another thing they don't mention here is when you're taking over payments on a mortgage, we're assuming obviously the mortgage it's matured to it's seasoned, all right? Not mature, but seasoned. In other words, been being paid on for a couple of years, which means each payment now has a greater portion of principal and a lesser portion of interest. So in other words, when you take over a property with an existing mortgage, if it's 10 years in, you've only got 20 years left on the mortgage, and each payment has more and more principal being paid down. So now let's just take a quick pause here. And I want to open you guys up. Let me go to the panel view. Okay, and see if we have any questions or comments. And I'll start off with a question here. Who here can see some of the downside risk in this? There's potential risk to the buyer and potential risk to the seller. So let's start with this. What would be a potential risk to the seller in this scenario? So go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to, or type in the chat box. And we're going to make this sort of a classroom style, okay? So
Well, the seller not keeping the mortgage current.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. They could damage the property. They could actually now, even without having the title, because they take certain rights of ownership, maybe they rent the thing out to some other tenant, right? And the tenant destroys the property or doesn't pay rent. And therefore the buyer doesn't, like you said, doesn't make the payments. What if, well, let's talk about this. Any more comments on the risk to the seller? Risk to the seller. Well, you guys are quiet. Hell, let's do a hand raise. Who's ever done one of these things before? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. I'm sorry, David, you want to speak up?
Yeah, so my question was, so in that contract for deed, is the buyer making the payment to the seller and the seller is then making the payment to the lender, or is the buyer making the payment directly to the lender?
Directly to the lender. Yep. So, which brings up another potential problem. Okay, the check's now coming from a different entity.
Yeah,
right?
what about the due on sale clause or something
Yep.
like that? Would that trigger that?
Due
Yeah.
on sale clause. So it could Melanie. Now what's interesting is I was in banking for 18 years, and you'd be surprised at how many banks would overlook it because the payment's being made. They're like, you know what, let's not rock the boat, the payment's being made.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I used to be a banker, and it doesn't take much to make a banker nervous. For example, Did you know on a homeowner's policy, insurance policy, a property insurance policy, if you have a lender, you have a mortgage, they're typically going to be named as what's called additional payee. So if you don't pay your insurance payment, right, or you don't renew it, guess who gets notified?
Lender.
The lender. And what are they going to do?
Yeah.
Get nervous and possibly call it a note. So that's why lenders always have escrow accounts for property taxes and insurance, because those are two areas where they can reduce risk by making sure the property taxes are paid and making sure the insurance policy is being paid on. So if there's a fire, they can get money on the property. So
Yeah, I'm curious if today, if you had a mortgage from, 5 or 6 years ago that was at 5 or 5.5%, and the lender saw that the payment's now coming in from a third party, if they would really care if it was coming in consistently, because they have actually a high performing asset at that point in time compared to what it would be if it was, if they called that note and then lent the money back out, they're going to lose, 3 points at least.
correct.
Gary, I kind of did one of these. I was actually involved with one of these on a commercial property with some businesses that I had owned, and we had an escrow. I was the one purchasing the commercial property, and my payments would go to an escrow account, and then the escrow account would make the payment to the person that was holding contract with me. And then she would make the payment directly. Actually, escrow dispersed her payment to her, and then the payment onto the party that she was in contract with.
Okay.
So can that be done residentially as well?
Yeah, what's interesting is I included here tonight a chapter from the sixth book I wrote on creative purchasing techniques. There's like 30 some odd techniques that I describe in there, and there's 2 or 3 that are very closely related to this one right here. They're just slightly different mechanics, but very close. And you can combine techniques. You can combine multiple strategies. Really, the sky's the limit. As long as it doesn't violate federal, state, or local law, you can always make an offer with terms, asking for these terms, and it's up to the seller to accept or decline or modify. And technically speaking, if a mortgage is behind, somebody is already in what's called pre-foreclosure and NOD status, notice of default. Whoever owns the mortgage, which is the bank, and you give them, basically they own the note. They have what's called first right of refusal. They can exercise the right to decline the offer if it's not enough to pay off the mortgage. They say, no, we're not going to allow that, because they don't want to have the risk of trying to collect the deficiency balance from somebody who's now no longer owns the property, right? Kind of makes sense. So I guess to answer your question, Teresa, the answer is yes, you can do that, and you can do a lot of other things too, So now before we move on, let's talk about why would somebody do this? What are some of the advantages? And we kind of talked about some of that. But the one obvious thing is when you take over an existing mortgage, the purchase agreement, there's no financing contingency, no qualifying, no appraisal, none of that kind of stuff. Qualifying is easy. Now, if I was a seller, I would still do due diligence on the buyer. Okay. But in a down market, it's easy to attract the buyers, because it's basically a buyer's market when the market's down, because there's more inventory and less buyers, right? You have less fees, fewer costs. Sometimes the buyers will pay more, right? Is there lender hassles, any kind of thing like that? You can usually close in 7 days or less. And senior number 5 says sellers can profit from financing. In other words, make up for lower prices with wraparound financing. What that means is, let's say the current owner's property his mortgage is $500 a month. You could offer to pay them $700 a month, right? We call that a wrap mortgage. In this case, if you make the payments directly to the bank, the additional $200 would go to the seller, right? Versus a upfront down payment. Now, some of the precautions we've already talked about. Melanie mentioned this, the due on sale clause, and here it says it right here. A lender may discover the transaction, force a refinance. Can't give a guarantee, but experience says lenders do not seem to notice or care as long as the buyer keeps making the payments. So in any case, if something happens, the buyer could lose their investment, right? Because they don't have title. So that's a downside to the buyer. But what's not mentioned here, let's talk about what are some of the risks to the buyer. So if you could, again, chime in, unmute yourself and let me know, in your opinion, if you were to think about all the things that could happen in the span of a life, what events would create risk for the buyer in this scenario? Let's see if we got, what's that?
Destruction of the property by maybe natural causes or something?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And what if the seller died and you don't have a, so like my son's actually in this situation against my scenario. His seller did not die, and yet I wanted him to just do a traditional, and he didn't. So he has a really loosey-goosey arrangement like this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if his health, he's older, I'm like, if his health fails, like you have nothing, and he's giving him all this money. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's life-changing events, so death. What if he become disabled or incapacitated, and they no longer, somebody's taken over guardianship for the person, right? What if they went through divorce? What if they lost their job? What if they just simply took the money and ran?
Yeah. It's all of those things have gone through my mind, Gary.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if they were making the payments directly to the lender. But, like you said, Melanie, there's additional funds that have gone into the transaction that, how are those accounted for if you can't really complete the transaction?
Yep. Yep. Now, I will tell you, there's a few more things that it could be appealing to a seller, and those things are, instead of flat out renting the place out, because they give up almost every right of ownership other than the actual title, that means they don't get any phone calls in the middle of the night. They don't have to fix anything. They don't have to repair anything. Literally, the buyer's assuming all rights of ownership other than they get the title. So there are some other benefits to the seller, and to the buyer. They actually get to take possession of a property and some of the rights of ownership, like they would have the right to lease it out and earn some rent, right? They can resell it for profit. They can do a lease option, right? Take an option payment, and at a future date, there's their buyer then takes over and buys it. So there's all kinds of benefits. I don't want to paint a picture that it's totally horrible or totally beneficial. It really is just like a lot of things in life. There's upside potential and downside risk. So in any case, let me check the chat boxes. I see there's out there.
Isn't it? I would think in today's market with historically low interest rates that if you have a senior seller, many of them, I'm in conversations with a guy right now who's coming off one of the mailers. He's got 4 properties. He doesn't want to sell them because he's got income.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, great. So you sell my house that's paid for $400,000. What do I do with that? I'm not going to put it in the market. I can't put it in the bank. So where do I put it?
Yeah.
And so this could be a great way to show someone who's looking for income. And they're tired of managing the property now, but they want income, how they can kind of get the best of both worlds if it's structured properly.
Well, I will tell you, I have he's really not a biological uncle, but one of my mom's best friends, we call her Aunt Susan, her husband's Uncle Don. They live in Magnolia, Texas, which is sort of north of Houston, beautiful area. And since he was 50, he started buying properties and holding and doing some flipping and things like that. Well, now he's in his 80s, they're all paid for. And instead of him doing outright sales, there's a large immigrant population in Texas, a lot of workers, and they need places to live, and they want to live the American dream. They want to own a home, and he sells these houses to them. He asks them for $10,000 down, and he gives them a mortgage, or he does owner financing for a higher interest rate than a bank note. You know, so if they're getting 4% of the bank, he's charging 8. So he's getting twice as much as what the bank's charging on interest. And he says in most cases, by in 3 to 5 years, they're refinancing. So he has like an annuity. He gets payments coming in spread out over time. He gets a big payoff. He can also sell the note, right, and cash it on the note. And he said even if they default in Texas, it's very easy to foreclose and gain possession back. Okay, it's much easier than it is in New York and California, New Jersey, places like that. Florida is another great state. If you're an owner, the laws are more easier on the owners in these kind of scenarios. So he does that, Dave, and that's his retirement. You know, he actually now he buys the Longhorn steer. It's funny because they have this. I mean, they're on walkers and stuff, but they got these Longhorn steer. That's great. It's funny, but in any case, Shamel, you're asking the book. The book is called The Massive Passive Cash Flow Method. I'm not allowed to sell it to you because I would be in trouble with Amazon, whoever the underlying publisher is. But I did retain the intellectual property rights, so I can send you an electronic version if you like. It's not on Kindle, but you can get an actual. You want me to send you a PDF? Okay. Actually, you know what I do, guys? What's that?
Yes, please. Thank
It's
you.
a big one too. It's like 500 and something pages. It's crazy.
Awesome. Thank you.
You know what I'll do, guys? Beverly's going to listen to this. Beverly, can everybody who's on tonight get the electronic version of the book? That would be great. And in there, guys, it's the chapter on creative purchasing techniques. And I'm going to show you here in just a second. We're going to go over some of the alternative strategies. But in any case, let's see. Melanie says, what if the
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm driving, listening through my phone. I'm seeing the writing, but I'm not really focused on it. So I just want to make sure, because I feel like I'm missing something here. I don't understand why this is a plus to do. Are we talking about from an investor standpoint who owns property that's going to want to do this strategy? Or are we talking from the standpoint of we're trying to acquire investment properties and somebody who, like you were saying, is in a pre-foreclosure, and then that's where I was lost. Like, why would we give money to someone who's already in distress for them to pay a note, or are we putting them out and taking their property and we're now assuming and pay? That's where I'm kind of lost and not understanding. And then you said something about if you're upside down that, it would be something to do, but I'm like, well, if you're upside down, why would it be in our benefit to go after you? So I'm just kind of lost on that portion.
Yep. So great question. So it targeted the technique, like when you read my book, you'll see the technique, you would see it from the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective. So there could be benefits to either or party, depending on the circumstances. But what we can do is, since Alyssa's on and she's actually looking at one now, Alyssa, are you still on?
I am.
Would you mind? So Target's got a great question. So you're looking at one now, and you're a creative person, and I love the fact that you're an entrepreneur, and you just looked at one. Would you mind sharing with Target why is it advantageous to look at this from the buyer's perspective, and then we can look at it partially from the seller's perspective after that?
Well, I hadn't done one of these, and I'm I learn by example. And if I have something tangible, I learn better from it. Why I'm considering it is because it's a pretty nice house in Macon, Georgia. I would be in for about 25 grand for a property that, and I still have to run my numbers, but it looks like it's about 120. When I went to the property today, I didn't actually get access, but I did take pictures of the heat pump and the electrical and the roof and the exterior property, and it looked really nice. And I also managed to see that there were other properties for rent. I had a call with Gary this morning, and we looked at rentals in the area. And so through the HUD site that Gary has shared with us on prior meetings. And it looked like, from what I was told versus what we saw on HUD, there was a bit of discrepancy in what I could rent it out for. So I was looking at it to be a potential rental and being able to assume the mortgage. Well, not really assume it, but do a subject to get this property without having to go through the loan process, because getting loans is a pain in the ass.
So can I just ask, can you explain what I'm missing is the in between? So you found this property owner who said, I can't afford to pay my mortgage anymore. And then you're like, well, I will come and pay the $25,000 that you have remaining on it, or I will help you and now take your property. That's where I'm just not understanding. Like, how did you get from here? There's a property that's going to be worth $25,000 that's actually worth $125,000 to I'm here and going to get their money for their property. Like, where does that put them? Where does that put you? And finding where's that in between there?
So they are just done with it. They just want to go. They don't. It came to me through friends, through a wholesaler. So that's why the numbers are wacky, and that's part of my due diligence.
Right.
And so getting the actual valuation. So it may not be a good deal, but it may be. I do like rental properties. Georgia is a good state to be a landlord in. I travel to Georgia a lot, so it's good to have destinations to make everything a business deduction for places you already visit. And so I don't know if it's a good deal yet. But I did see there were a couple of rentals in the area. So what I want to do is I got shots of the houses and their addresses, on my phone. And when I finally get home, I'm going to look them up and call the property management companies that were listed and see what they're going for and what they're renting for and what that includes.
Okay.
And so I'm not.
Just to make sure I got this, and I'm sorry guys if I'm extending this, I want to just make sure. So it came to you through friends or family, or in our case, any way that we get a tip. Hey,
Yes.
There's a property, they don't want to be there anymore. And that's hence where the whole them vacating the property would make it now worthwhile, because you can turn it into XYZ, whatever you'd like.
Correct. And
okay, so now if they weren't going to leave, then that's when I'm guessing, Gary, you're going to speak on like a whole nother situation on why this potentially could still be a good opportunity.
Yeah. So a couple things here. So from the seller's perspective, sometimes we just really call them don't wanters. They're just flat out tired. They don't even care. They just want the thing to go away. And so a quick, easy subject to purchase like this gives them exactly what they need. It's very fast, very inexpensive. They just literally walk away. From the buyer's perspective, they could potentially pick up a good rental property for not having to go through the traditional bank mortgage process with appraisers and inspections and all this kind of stuff. It's easy, fast, it's clean, and they get a good deal. They get a good price, So that's sort of a summary there. But you're right, as far as the analysis goes, we still have to do due diligence, just like we do on any purchase. So we got to analyze the rents in the area. So this is why I brought up this screen here. This is the HUD FMR website, and I like it because it's found to be fairly accurate, and there's nobody's trying to sell anything here. It's just government data. So and it's somewhat conservative, but I like going in with high hopes and low expectations. In other words, I err on the side of conservative, and if I end up being, very too conservative, then I'm pleasantly surprised. But I'd rather take my chances of being pleasantly surprised than being unpleasantly disappointed by overshooting. So in any case, Alyssa's doing the right thing. She's doing the research. Remember our motto is education plus information plus action equals results. So this may not be a good deal. That's why she said that. So we're looking at some information. We got more to look at, and always do a physical inspection of the property, and go through the whole due diligence to determine if you're going to buy it based on their current terms. And there may be some negotiating room. Alyssa might come back and say, you know what? I understand I'm taking over $80,000 mortgage. It's already paid down to 70 something. I like that, but I don't want to give you 25,000. I'll give you 15,000, something like that. But the bottom line is, this is a time to negotiate, and you never fudge on your benchmarks. And the reason I say that is right now we're in a phase we call silly money. It's not just in real estate, it's in the stock market too. People are literally outbidding each other. It's just like crazy. And it's like they would rather get the property at any cost as opposed to making sure they always get a good deal. They just like, I gotta get a dang property. I'm so tired of getting beat out. And they just go up 10,000, 20,000. There was one property in Pennsylvania, Christine was telling me about, where the price was 40 something thousand and it went for 80 something thousand. Now it's a good deal still, right? But they did due diligence. I'm just telling you.
18 offers.
Yeah, 18 offers on their property. So a situation like this, it's under the radar screen. It's not marketed on the MLS. You got less competition. So you see what I'm seeing, Target, there's these other factors that are in Alyssa's favor. She doesn't have to worry about 18 other offers coming in, at least as far as we know. So in any case, there was a couple more chats. I think Chris had one. Okay, so Chris is asking, how does this differ from owner financing? So Chris, with owner financing, the seller would actually draw up or somebody on behalf of the seller and buyer would draw up a mortgage and note, just like a regular purchase involving a bank. It's just now the owner is the lender. So in this case, what Alyssa's looking at, she would actually be taking over the mortgage payments. That's different. So owner financing is the owner literally finances the buyer for the purchase of the owner's property. And everything's recorded and just like you do in a regular purchase with a regular bank. And typically in that case, the owner would not have an existing mortgage, or they wouldn't be doing owner financing. In that case, they would do something like a wrap mortgage, which I'll show you guys coming up here. Excellent question though. Okay, so Teresa's asking, use an escrow title company to receive and distribute payments between the parties, maintain amortization of the contract, maintain some safety and records. Yeah, so when that's usually a safer way to go. And it's a different type of, it's not necessarily subject to, although you can construe any of these techniques and twist them and modify them, improvise them, do all kinds of things with them. So let's do this, guys. If you're interested, would you like to just go over one or two alternative strategies that are similar to this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And by the way, if you do have questions, guys, please speak up. This is, I'm going to start calling these classes. And by the way, I wanted to let you know, if you weren't on the last Wednesday Global Investor Agent Team call, if you want to bring a guest on, instead of me letting you invite them to our monthly team call, I thought, why not just invite them to the weekly classes? Because I'm already doing it. I'm used to having guests on sometimes, and I don't get distracted because we're focusing on content. What I notice on the team meetings, I'm finding myself getting distracted, which is unfair to you, of course. But on these classes, if you want to bring in a guest just to let them see who we are and what we do and how we do it, I'm fine with that, because we just talk about content. I'm not actually selling anything or anything like that. I'm just basically going over what people ask me about. So it's an educational opportunity. It lets them see a little bit about who we are. So in any case, by the way, I want to point out one thing here on this HUD rent chart. If you notice, when Melissa and I were looking at this, we looked at the difference in rents between the different types of units, between efficiency in 1 bedroom, 1 and 2 bedroom, 2 and 3 bedroom, and so forth. And we looked at the range of difference. In other words, the ratio. If you notice, between efficiency and 1 bedroom, there's a difference of $175. Between a 1 and a 2 is a difference of $96.94, I don't know, 90 something, $94 maybe. But between 2 and 3 bedrooms, it's a difference of, what is that, $230? That's a pretty big jump, right? And then between 3 and 4 is only 136. So where was the biggest jump? It was between 2 and 3 bedrooms. So what does that tell us? Where would you say is the sweet spot in this scenario? Which size property? So just raise your hand or open unmute yourself.
3 bedroom.
3 bedroom, that's it. It just happens to be that Alyssa's property she's looking at is a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom. So it's another indicator that she's got a property in high demand. Everybody wants 3 bedrooms. Okay. All right, let me do the quick chat box here real quick and we'll get back to what I was going to do.
Can I ask a quick question first?
Yes.
Before you go into the alternatives, could we understand, but I know the owner wants to get out, but what are the reasons the owner wants to get out? And what's I understand you get 25,000 to get this subject to, and then how much of a mortgage is there to acquire? Just like, what are the facts so we can all understand? Maybe we can all brainstorm and come up with a good deal structure.
So Alyssa, do you recall what the actual principal balance is now? Did he actually give you that information? Oops, we may have lost her.
No, I'm here. I'm
Oh,
here.
there, okay.
I had to find the little unmute button. So all I know so far is they just want out. I don't know if it's a family reason, if they're getting divorced. I'm not sure. I do have to do I need more information on that. There are 2 mortgages. There's the first loan at 81K. It is it's paid for about 8 years. And so there's 22 left and it's at 3.75, I think. I'm recalling this from memory, so my numbers might be a little off. There's a second lien or loan on it in second position that's 10K, and the 10K will be used, of the 25K, 10K will be used to pay that. So it'll be one mortgage of 81,000 for 22 years at 3.75. So the payments are $750, includes taxes. I was told taxes, but not insurance. So I need to get a mortgage statement to see what's going on there. I think it's not behind. They're just tired of it. So that's it.
Yeah. Now, and by the way, what was the ARV on that? I think you said they were thinking 125, but on your research, you thought it might be more like 115.
In RPR, what I saw was 116 with a 1-star rating. And of course, the wholesaler is telling me 130. The Zestimate, which everyone knows is garbage, is like 130. So there weren't a lot of comps that were. This house was built in 1990. The recent solds for 3.2s were from the 50s. But they were all close. They were all like within a quarter of a mile of this subject.
Okay.
Did I get everything? What else was that Tom?
Yeah.
Who asked the question? Yeah, so we just got home.
Yep.
I didn't have to go to Orlando, so
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Yeah, you're home. And by the way, so
yeah.
that, the 25,000, is that the wholesaler's fee, or is any of that going to the owner?
Well, yeah, that's what the wholesaler is asking. So I don't know what the owner has in mind.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would definitely, I'd work on that wholesaler, you know?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the starting point.
Yep. So, just tell them you know people, you know?
What I'm trying to figure out if the numbers make sense.
Yeah.
Even just at the wholesaler, you know, like if it makes sense, if the rents are truly 1,200, and they may very well be. It's a very nice neighborhood. The houses are in good shape. The cars are pretty decent. I would say it's a good working class neighborhood. It's kind of hilly. A
Yep.
downside is you do hear the highway noise. A plus side, it's in Macon. Warner Robins is not far. That's where the Air Force Base is.
Yep.
You know, so there's some good stuff.
Yeah. We're a couple hours from the beach. You know, you're an hour.
Yeah, it's not
or so
far
from
from Savannah.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a pretty nice area.
Yeah. And I will tell you guys, I've been there a number of times. It's always been a good, solid investor area because of the pricing. The one caution I would throw to the wind, and I don't know why this is, guys, but I just happen to notice this. Look at the 2019 FMR versus the 2020 FMR on the rents. What do you notice? Which direction did they go?
Down.
Yeah. We should try to find out why that is.
You don't think it's COVID?
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I haven't. Christine, have you heard of people lowering their rents this last year because of the virus? You have?
A little bit.
Okay, she says a little bit. Yeah, so could be. Yep. Okay. Good call, Alyssa.
Do we know how that FMR is calculated?
Yeah, right below here it tells you. So if you go to that link, it went out in what class was that? I think it was the first class in January, David. So it'd have been like the email that went out on, I think, the 6th or something like that. Has the links. Well, here, I'll just do this. Let me copy this. So I'll put it right in the chat box.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if it's based upon what the rent is supposed to be or on collected rent.
Well, these are on actual. Well, if you look at this, it's based on historical data, and they're projecting slightly forward using a trend curve. That's what they're doing. You know. Yep. So, but let's see. Yeah, Chris says California, our rents went up. In most cases, guys, rents have been on the increase. Okay. There's an amazing demand right now for multifamily from an investor's perspective, but also it's one of the most hard to explain markets in the history of real estate. In other words, interest rates are low, right? So more people have been buying for a lot of years now. But what's amazing is the percentage of renters has been going up. California, 40% of Californians rent right now, more than 40% actually. It's been going up. How do you explain this stuff? But that's the data, So
A lot of kids are moving with their parents and moving out.
Yep. Hey, by the way, let me just show you one more thing here. This right here is an addendum, right? A secured land trust addendum, contract for deed. So that was loaded to the workplace I think Jamila, unfortunately I loaded two things, the same thing twice. So I just put, I think this out there. So all three, the chapter from the book, the written description of what a subject to purchase is, and this contract for deed secured land trust addendum is all on Workplace. You can get them there. And I think Beverly may be able to include these also in tomorrow's email that goes out. So if she doesn't have them, I can get them to her, you know. But what I'll do is I just want to point out one or two things here. I don't want to cover all these creative purchasing techniques, but the chapter starts off with just a basic scenario. Why would people do this? Like Tom was asking, you know, why, or Targan too, great question is why actually, what's the market reason for doing these types of techniques? And usually it comes down to needs and wants. Sometimes sellers, believe me, I've owned hundreds of properties. And I can tell you there are some of them, if somebody made me a good offer, I darn sure will sell the thing. I've had properties that just make me get old fast. But in any case, there's all kinds of sources for financing. This gives you a list here, 10 different sources for possible sources of capital, excuse me. But everything in here is, I kind of give the explanation and then an example and some numbers just to let you see how these things work. Pledged asset mortgage. I'll just tell you briefly what it is. It means if you can pledge a boat, a car, coin collection, art collection, jewelry collection, anything that's a tangible asset, you can pledge the asset in as a collateral for a mortgage. Okay, that's. I'm not going to go into all the details because there's more things I want to show you. Sorry, okay, bank loans, other sources, other creative sources of down payment. So that's just getting down payments. Blanket mortgage. We've talked about that before. That's where you get a blanket mortgage over top of your other mortgages. It's a second mortgage. And I've done that in the commercial world a couple times actually. Using the broker's commission. So if you had a big commission coming in on a big purchase, you could make that, turn that into a note, right? And so you would never, if somebody ever said, "Can I pay you your commission over time?" Don't ever just say yes. Say, "I would entertain that as long as we draw it up as an official note that I'm going to record." Okay. And so if you fall behind, I'm gonna go enforce a judgment. So I wouldn't do it for a $10,000 commission, but I might do it for a $100,000 commission, a portion of it. Maybe I take 25 now and finance to 75 and get a 10% interest rate on 75,000. And then you can turn around and do what with that note? You can sell it. Yep. So in any case, there's lots of descriptions for these things. Buy low, refinance high. We call that the Burr method. Create a note and sell it for cash. We just talked about that in an example of deferring your commission. Defer a portion of the purchase price. In other words, let's say you're in a market like British Columbia or I'm sorry, Vancouver or San Francisco. You know, houses there are just ridiculous. I mean, we flipped one in Burlingame one time for like 2.3 million. Heck, in Macon, Georgia, that thing would be under 200,000. You know, so you can defer a portion of the purchase price to a later date. And obviously, the risk is it doesn't keep going up, but the advantage is if it keeps going up, you basically, benefited now from a future increase in value. You can take upcoming rents, like rent credits, things like that, deposits, and use those to leverage for down payment. Okay. Then we get into all the government stuff, 203B loans. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but equity loan, you know about that. Okay, land contracts. Okay. This is sort of what we were referring to earlier. The differences with this is typically how do I say this? Subject to is technically a land contract. It's technically what it's actually. That's why I said on the addendum, it was actually addendum for deed or land contract. Okay. So there's not much difference here. And they talk about what happens with the due on sale clause and all that. But the reality is seller financing, this is a form of seller financing, but it's really not, because what you're doing is the existing mortgage stays in place, and the buyer can give you a larger payment than what you're making on your current mortgage, and you pocket the rest, okay? So there's one difference there, as opposed to giving a bunch of money up front, okay? But what I want to get to is a wrap mortgage that'll help explain this further, okay? So we already talked about the buyer taking over the seller's payment. Life insurance policy loan, we'll let you read that on your own. Lower the price, raise the interest rate. So you can play with terms and rates any way you want. Raise them, lower them, stretch them out, do all that kinds of things you can do to have a lower payment if you want. Private mortgage, you can move from a first position to a second position. Obtain a new mortgage for existing loan and provide seller down payment. That's actually a really neat one there. Guys, read number 15 on your own. That's a really good creative technique, especially when the market's going down, okay? Either starting to go down or starting to go up, either one, it would work. Rental participation, I'll just describe that briefly. We do this on big properties. Let's say we have a big property that's 90 units and only 30 of them are rented out, okay? The seller knows the property is worth more than what it says on paper, but the buyer's obviously cautious because he's got 60% or 70% vacancy. What you could say is, Mr. Seller, I'll give you a purchase price now based on today's value, based on rents. It's based on what's called the income approach to valuation. However, I will share with you any increase in future rents coming up. So the seller gets, the sale plus future profits or increased rents based on your management, okay? So that's what that involves. Satisfy the seller's needs, essentially just find out what it is they want and help them get it. Discounted bonds, we'll pass on that one for the moment. Using the equity one property to buy another. So we do that all the time. It's basically like you're doing it in a chain. Property A has 50,000 in equity. We'll get a loan on that, extract the equity, make a down payment on the next property, right? With a brand new first mortgage, then get a loan on that equity to do the third one. And basically it's like a chain effect, okay? Okay, here we go, wraparound mortgage. The difference here is the seller keeps making the payment to the bank on their existing mortgage. So the buyer's giving the seller a higher payment, okay? The seller takes the payment, makes their mortgage payment, and keeps the difference and pockets it. And there's lots of interesting math here because if you think about it, the seller's mortgage generally has maybe 20 years on it, where the buyer's mortgage to the seller is brand new, so it has 10 years on it. So what that means is in 20 years' time, the buyer takes over the property with 10 years left on their mortgage, right? And the other mortgage is now completely satisfied. And the whole time that mortgage was already had some amortization taken care of and some equity built up and so forth. And if you do the math on this kind of scenario, there's some tremendous advantage to both the seller and the buyer. I just want you to study it on your own so you can compare this with what we discussed earlier, which is a standard subject to, and tell me what you think are the biggest differences and advantages, and we can talk about it next week. Very easy read. When I wrote this, I'm not writing a dissertation for my doctorate degree. I just use plain, simple, real life examples. And some of these are actual real examples from real life. So study it, see how you can apply it in your marketplace, okay? Maybe you can use it yourself. And the rest of these, a lot of these are government or quasi-government underwritten loans. There's a bunch of things you can do here. I think there's probably 20 different techniques here in this section alone. A lot of them are special loan programs for specific groups, sometimes based on ethnicity, sometimes based on economics, all kinds of factors. So in any case, let me see here. Somebody had raised a hand. Hang on one second. When you sell a note, okay.
I raised my hand.
Oh, hey, Bonnie, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I wanted to see if there's any of these strategies that you would point to for an assisted living facility. So when I'm working on that, like, okay, I found one that's, when you see ones that are for sale, and okay, if I don't qualify all by myself for this one particular one, and I have other people that I ask for to be a silent partner, but they want to be real partners. And I want a real partner. I want a silent partner, right?
Yeah.
So what with this, do you see any that I should read on my own that might like come to mind right now that might be cool?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily in here, but I think well, let me ask you this, if you don't mind. What's the size of the property? Like how many beds or how many bedrooms?
Well, it's actually, they're allowed to have 15 beds. I don't know why, but he took it down to 14 beds. Not
Okay.
quite sure why. And the price is right at $1 million.
Okay. All right, well, something like that. There's one of my students has a big project in Florida right now. It's like 190 something units assisted living, and it's a $22 million project. So she's actually, she has a complete business plan with a private offering memorandum, things like that. So she's raising. See, capital markets are tight right now, Melanie. It's, in other words, people have been a little bit. Not hesitant, but stricter. Partly because of the virus, the government's printing money like crazy, and they really just are not sure. And yet the stock market's now what, 31,000? I mean, there's factors involved right now that generally don't go together, in historically speaking. Historically low interest rates for such a long period of time.
Right.
And where's the inflation? Yet we're seeing it at pricing in housing, but it's just, I mean, Tom knows what I'm talking about. Just these factors that generally, it's the picture, the painting is different than anything we've seen before. So in any case, what I'm getting at is, it sounds like you want to raise capital and you be the owner, 100% owner, and then they're going to lend you money for a certain rate of return. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. There's a technique in here called the partnership technique. So let me go down here and I'll see if I can find it for you. Lease options, I think it's the very next one. Whoops. 1031 exchange, nope, that's not it. Partnership.
Syndication,
I'm sorry, what's that?
a syndication?
Yeah, one reason I'm thinking of partnerships, Thomas, it's just $1 million. It's not like, 20 million or something like that. However, there's no low level limit on how low you can go on what the dollar amount is on a syndication. There's no high limit. It's just something like this, $1 million. Generally speaking, I would put together a package, and offer them an interest rate, something that's appealing, Melanie. So not like something like 6%, something more like 8%.
Okay.
So, and then give them make it simple interest, okay, and tell them you'll pay it off in 3 years. We'll loan in 3 years. You got to get some regular note in 3 years, or regular mortgage, and pay it off. But is it possible for you to get a commercial mortgage right now based on your if somebody was to run a pre-approve you, remember they would include the income on the property in the
Yeah, and I might be underestimating my buying power because of that. I'm in the beginning stages. This idea came to me from one of your meetings. And then since then I've been, I did the certification, I've been in Jean's class and that, but what I haven't done yet, I'm also working on my MBA right now. So I was in these challenging classes. So this semester here is like my time to work on my business plan and put together my financials for this. So I might be underestimating what I can get, but I do have excellent credit, and I do have, the income for this property. It looks good, and also we're supposed to look for that opportunity of what's missing and what can we do. So I do see some a way to add back that bed and some extra opportunity there too.
Okay. What I'll do, I'll send you Diane's business plan so you can see it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very involved. As much, yours won't need to be nearly as involved. But I will tell you this, if you're going to go outside the traditional lending institutions, commercial, conventional,
Mhm.
anybody in the capital market, they're going to want to, first thing they're going to ask you is how much are you putting in, you know?
Right.
So that's why I asked the question, if you're going to put something in going to the capital markets and they're going to want you to see a big chunk, try the traditional route first. Go to a local community bank. Go to a community bank, okay? And here's the thing. Here's what you say, Melanie. First, walk in. You know, build yourself a business plan. Walk in or make an appointment. Excuse me. Make an appointment first with their lender, community lender. And instead of saying you'd like to borrow money from them, here's my business plan. Say, you know, I'm pursuing residential assisted living. They're familiar with that in Texas. They'll know what it is. I have a business plan. I already have some properties in mind. I want to seek your advice on how is the best way for me to approach this from a borrowing perspective. What would you suggest I do to achieve this goal? And that way you make them a partner. And I guarantee you, if there's a way for them to make it work, they will make it work just because of the way you phrase that, you know?
Love it. Can you say that again?
Yeah, what you would do is you go in prepared, and they always want to know, first thing they're going to ask you is well, what property? So you want to have 2 or 3 in mind, maybe bring in some pictures or some listings or something. Bring in a business plan. Doesn't have to be 100 pages. I mean, honestly, you know, 10 pages is plenty. And I'll send you Diane's as a model. Now, what you do is instead of going and saying, I'd like to take a loan out on this project I have, what you want to say is, and don't make it like I'm going to, or I would like to say I'm pursuing a purchase to be used for residential assisted living. I would like to keep the financing I would like to keep ownership to myself. All right.
Okay.
Can you please look at this and tell me, what would you suggest to me is the best strategy for me to borrow money to make this purchase? What's the smartest thing I can do from your perspective to meet this objective? Okay. The objective doesn't mean you borrowing the money. And really all you're doing is you're bringing them in as a partner, a trusted advisor, and you're seeking their advice. And when you're prepared like that, and you have a good credit rating, by the way, they're gonna want to see you succeed. They want to be, and if the numbers are really good, believe me, I love residential assisted living. Some of the returns are just phenomenal, you know. And they're used to seeing typical rental returns, you know, like you get a multiple of 1, for example. Here, residential assisted living, you can easily have a multiple of 2, 3, 4. That's tremendous low risk to bank. The only thing that probably would scare them is you're going to have to explain the difference between medical and non-medical, you know?
Right.
And then they'll know that that's less risk to them. So if you get hit by the bus, they take over. They don't want to be dealing with all the liability and dealing with medications and stuff like that. So if you tell them it's the basically it's assisted living is what they call it. That will mean a lot to them, you know. But the big thing is you want to go in asking their advice. That's the position you want to be in. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then read this partnership piece here. It's a little bit more. It made it last because it's more involved.
Okay.
But if Tom, would you mind? Tom mentioned syndication. So syndication generally implies there's certain regulations you have to follow when you're doing a syndication. So you have to be careful if you're offering a specific investment, then you would generally follow syndication rules. If you're just offering an opportunity to be part of investing in maybe, you know, a future block of properties or a bulk sale or something like that, that's different. You're just raising funds inside of a partnership. But a syndication means, so Tom, would you mind, for the sake of the group here, kind of elaborating on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand it, it's you're getting investors, like almost like you're raising money to just form a company, But you can create the terms so that you can, as the main person running the syndication, you can get more profits on the gain, or and the people who are investing can get less. And there's a lot of regulation depending on the size of the syndication. I don't know all the rules around it, but when it gets to a certain size and certain dollar value, they have to be certified investors. They have to have certain net worths, and
Oh, that's right. Okay.
and they also have to, there's SEC stuff that can get involved, so you don't want it to get too big. So yeah, that's all I can say about it. I know a few people have done it, but I spoke to somebody recently, this is sort of related, who's doing something similar. What he's doing is he's acquiring real estate and he's renting rooms out.
Hmm.
And he's renting them to prisoners who just got out of prison.
Yeah.
And they need like a halfway house.
Mhm.
And the government is paying him, so it's guaranteed he's going to get paid. It's pretty secure. So he might know more about how you could, and he raised money to do that by a loan. So I don't know, I can put you in touch with him. He might be able to give you some advice.
That would be lovely. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So you guys like this one tonight, huh? So it was very
Yes.
active, lots of participation. I tell you what, what's interesting is we should probably spend like maybe one of these every month on the investing side of the business, because we get so caught up in trying to get the clients right and service them through our marketing that we don't really discuss this much. And yet you're going to get approached with these questions sometimes, and it's nice to be able to speak about them, so maybe we'll do another one of these, and we can go into analyzing flips or analyzing rentals, or talk more specifically about creative purchasing techniques. And what I'll ask you guys is please give me your feedback, give me questions, the things you want to talk about, so I can prepare, just like I did with Alyssa in this one. And it's fun for me because sometimes some of these things I haven't done in years, and things change, new things develop, and the world's continuing to improve and grow, and we want to be right along with them, So,
Right.
okay, guys. Oh, let me check. One more chat. Let me just make sure. Melanie, okay, good. Melanie KWS, yeah, I know I've got your email. All right. So Beverly's going to call me before she sends this out. I'll make sure it's everything she needs. In the meantime, I will see all of you next Monday for class. And then for the GIA team members, I'll see you Wednesday night for the team call. Lots of good stuff to go over there. And for everybody, God bless you and your families. Stay safe. Have an awesome week. And I'll see you on the finish line. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
You're welcome.